Chris Grier was already on the hot seat coming into this year and needed a solid season to save his job, specifically impactful rookies. Well, through 3 weeks, that has been the complete opposite. The rookies Miami have drafted really has not contributed anything to this point, especially their top two guys, who, when they were selected, myself and many others expected them to be plug-and-play guys. They drafted Kenneth Grant, the defensive lineman from Michigan, with a 13th pick, and then in round 2, they traded up to draft offensive lineman from Arizona, Jonah Savaiinaea. Well, through 3 weeks on Pro Football Focus, Kenneth Grant is the 154th graded defensive lineman out of 169, and Jonah Savaiinaea is dead last, 95 out of 95 for offensive guards through 3 weeks. It's just been really, really bad. And I know it is probably unfair to criticize these rookies to this degree through 3 weeks of their career. But the point is this, and it's more of a reflection on Chris Grier than it is these rookies. They are getting put into impossible spots because they were expected to be productive, at least league average starters right away with the state of this roster in terms of the offensive line and defensive line. So you can label it fair or not fair, but the NFL isn't fair. We needed them to be high-level players right away, and they've been anything but that. It's been an unmitigated disaster. I think enough is enough. I want the Dolphins to fire Chris Grier at least at the end of the season. If you want to let him go throughout the rest of the year, sure, whatever. But they need to get rid of him. He cannot be the GM of this football team in the draft, free agency, and beyond. Type Y for yes if you agree. Type N if you disagree. But I want to look at each of these guys because through 3 weeks, Kenneth Grant has been pretty non-existent. And I'll be honest, he's played a relatively decent amount of snaps, especially with Benito Jones missing the past, or at least missing week 2. So I would have expected Grant to be maybe a little bit better and more noticeable through 3 weeks as a rookie. Well, that's not been the case. You see his numbers on screen. He only has 7 tackles, 2 pressures. But the part that's been concerning is that his inability to really influence the run game. That's the part that's concerning. I did not expect Kenneth Grant to come in and be some all-world interior defensive line pass rushing menace as a rookie. No, I didn't expect that. But I did expect his physicality, his size, his motor to be able to really help stop the run. But he really hasn't been that good. And you look at his advanced numbers on PFF, he has a 3.4% pass rush win percentage and a 7.4 run defense stop percentage. The run defense stop percentage does rank inside the top 8 for the Dolphins as a team, but it's still not that good whatsoever. And I want to go back to this opening point. I don't think that he's a bad football player, and I'm not labeling his career over, but I did expect more early on. And I think when Miami drafted him 13th overall, that was more of a high floor pick in my opinion. There were certainly players that had a higher ceiling. I would even label the defensive lineman they selected Grant over. Walter Nolan, who obviously got hurt. Derek Harmon. Those defensive tackles had a way higher ceiling, but Grant had a higher floor. So you expected him to contribute more early on in his career this season. But some of the players drafted in the first round, early second round, that I labeled as fits for Miami, it just hurts for us to pass on them. Tyler Warren, the pick after for Miami, has been absolutely phenomenal for the Indianapolis Colts. Gray Zabel, a player that I was interested in, has been really good for the Seattle Seahawks. I really liked Malaki Starks, the safety from Georgia. He's been solid for Baltimore. Emmanwori, another player I had on my top 10 board for Miami, has been solid in Seattle. But the one that stings the most is Will Johnson, who was ultimately drafted 47th, fell due to injury concerns. He has been great for the Cardinals in the first 2 weeks. Missed week 3 with an injury, got hit hard in the ribs, but the concern was his knee. He was drafted in the second round. He was my number 1 guy for Miami with the 13th pick. He has been awesome. He was great in the preseason, and he was great in the first 2 weeks of the year before missing week 3. I mean, you look at his regular season statistics, 8 of 14 when targeted. 7 yards per catch allowed. QB rating of 66.7 and 4 PBUs. I mean, I don't want to say, and I'm not labeling Kenneth Grant as a bust. It's just a little frustrating because going into the draft, we labeled the biggest need for the Miami Dolphins corner because they never replaced Kendall Fuller, and we knew Jalen Ramsey heading into the draft was likely either near the end of his career in Miami or going to get traded, which he obviously did. So the Dolphins never had a succession plan for Jalen Ramsey. I wanted it to be Will Johnson. My top 2 players on my big board going into the first round of the draft was Will Johnson, number 1, Jahdae Barron, number 2. And Will's been phenomenal so far. It just hurts because, listen, even if they didn't go with Will Johnson, but they went with the best player on the board, which regardless of position, without a question, was Tyler Warren, the player that went after. I didn't think Jonnu Smith was going to be traded at that point in the offseason. I don't think anyone did. But if you're Chris Grier and you had any inclination that you weren't going to have Jonnu Smith on the roster this year, you should have taken Tyler Warren because he was the best player on the board, and he would have absolutely changed this Dolphins offense. It's just tough. It's tough. Make sure you are subscribed because we're going to have daily coverage of this football team regardless of if the Dolphins are good or bad. We'll be live on Monday night for Dolphins-Jets Week 4. Subscribe and join the family. Let's transition from the first-round pick to the second-round pick because Jonah Savaiinaea has been, without a question, much worse compared to Kenneth Grant. Jonah. 11 pressures allowed, 2 penalties, a pass-blocking grade of 5.3. Somehow that's not the worst in the NFL. According to PFF, he had a 0.0 pass-blocking grade in both Week 2 and Week 3. I don't know how that's possible. You see his grades for the season so far on screen. Well, here is how he grades out. We already told you he's the worst graded offensive guard in the NFL through 3 weeks. Well, he's the 83rd guard in run blocking, 90th in pass blocking, 72nd penalties with 2 through 3 weeks, and 93rd in pressures allowed with 11. Simply put, there's no way to sugarcoat it. He has been the worst offensive guard in the NFL through 3 weeks. And that's just tough pill to swallow. Like I mentioned with Grant, is it fair that we're expecting him to be at least an average NFL starter right away? No, probably not. But that is what he was asked to be. It's what fans expected, and it has been anything but the case. And the part that's even the most concerning with Jonah, in my opinion, is that you could say, all right, he might struggle with pass blocking early on in his career. Makes sense. But most NFL evaluators expected Jonah to be able to be at least a league average run blocker. And that's what Miami needed the most, to be honest, because to improve that run blocking. But he has been anything but in the run blocking game. It's been brutal. More coming up here in a second. But this episode is brought to you by PrizePicks. On PrizePicks, the right decisions can make you paid. And it's good to be right on PrizePicks. It's so simple to play. Just pick more or less on 2 to 6 player stat projections. If you get your picks right, you could cash in. It's available to play in more than 40 states, including California, Texas, and Georgia. They invented the flex play, which means you can still cash out if your lineup isn't perfect. Double your money, even if one of your picks does not hit. I got an entry in for the early Sunday game in Dublin, between Minnesota and Pittsburgh. More than Jordan Mason rushing yards, less than Jonnu Smith receiving yards. And to take advantage of the more max discount, Jalen Hurts, half a passing yard. Download the app today and use code CLNS to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code CLNS to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks. It's good to be right. When going back and talking about Jonah, I do want to give a shout out to Coach Eric Smith on social media because I read a tweet he sent out on Jonah, and I do actually agree. He basically talked about how Jonah Savaiinaea was expected to be the 5th best offensive lineman on this team. Coming into the year, rookie, he was supposed to be the 5th guy. because you got Aaron Brewer, Austin Jackson, James Daniels, and Patrick Paul. But Jonah, because of injuries to Jackson and James Daniels and having to start Keon Smith, Larry Borum, has been left on an island way more than you would have expected him to be, because the protections are having to be slid towards the right side, the blind side for Tua, to help out Larry Borum and Keon Smith, whether it is a tight end chipping like Julian Hill, whether it is Ali Gordon chipping, Devon Achane chipping, regardless of the way you want to do it. Aaron Brewer sliding over, however you want to spin it. They have had to have more help on the right guard, right tackle duo than anticipated. I think coming into the year, you would have expected, all right, Miami can leave the two veterans, Jackson and Daniels, on islands, shift Aaron Brewer to help Jonah Savaiinaea, and even have a running back or tight end be on the lookout to help block and help the rookie from Arizona. But because of the injuries, they've had to help the right side, letting Jonah be on an island, and he has simply not been able to hold his own. I tend to agree with that notion, but you still would hope Jonah, in the sink or swim situations, would be able to tread water. I'm not asking you to be Michael Phelps swimming above water. Just tread. Just hold your own so we don't have to have the worst left guard in all of football right now. And it's tough because I'll look at this again. Some players drafted after Jonah. And once again, I don't want to harp on this too much. Miami traded up to get him. They traded pick 48 and 98 to move up to grab Jonah at 37. When they could have drafted Will Johnson. They would have had to trade up to get him. But once again, even if you didn't want to take Will because of the injury concern, you wanted to go Grant in the first round. Okay. You had an opportunity to take Will in the second, and you passed. And it stings, as I mentioned earlier. Tate Ratledge has a better offensive line grade so far this year. He's been a starting guard for the Lions, picked after Jonah. Cornerback, obviously need. Trey Amos has been solid for Washington out of Ole Miss. Andrew Makuba, a safety, maybe a little bit rich at 37, but if you stayed at 48 and drafted him, there wouldn't have been any complaints. He's been really good for Philadelphia on the back end, a position of need. I don't want to harp on it because hindsight's 2020, and I want to give the two rookies, Kenneth Grant and Jonah Savaiinaea, more of a sample size before making final judgments. But through 3 weeks, you can't be happy with anything you have seen on the football field between your first two draft picks. And it just is further evidence that Chris Grier should not be the man in charge of decisions when it comes to this football team. As I mentioned off the top of the video, I am not putting all of the blame on Jonah and Kenneth Grant. I am putting, if you were to play the blame game, I'm going 70% Chris Grier, 30% Kenneth Grant and Jonah, because they're getting put into impossible situations right now, and it's all Chris Grier's fault. But you would have hoped to see better efforts from Kenneth Grant and Jonah. My panic meter is pretty high, but I want to know yours. What is your panic meter, scale of 1 to 10, on the Dolphins' first two selections, Kenneth Grant and Jonah Savaiinaea? Let me know. The best rookie on the team so far has been the one you drafted in the 6th round in Ali Gordon. And it's hard for that to be really something I can fathom, because when Ali Gordon was drafted, he was RB4. He was behind, obviously, Achane, behind Alexander Madison, behind Jalen Wright. But he's ascended to be your RB2 because of injuries to Wright and Madison, and he's been better than Jalen Wright. But the fact that your best rookie is a 6th-round running back is a little bit concerning. But I do want to show OG2 some love, because out of the 63 qualified running backs that have gotten at least 10 carries, he has ranked as the 24th best in overall. That factors in pass blocking, receiving, running. But when you just run the football, designed handoffs, he's the 9th graded running back. He's been awesome. And it was mostly because of his strong Week 3 performance against the Buffalo Bills, where among running backs with 10-plus snaps, he was the 5th graded running back out of 54. He forced 4 missed tackles, 9th best, and he was 8th best in yards after contact and first downs picked up. He's been awesome. And I'm going to round out today's show with a positive message, because let's hope these rookies get going. Easier schedule over the next month. You played the Bills, 3-0. You played the Colts, 3-0. Patriots, 1-2 in the first 3 games. Let's hope over the next month where you play the 0-3, or no, excuse me, 1-2 Panthers, 1-2 Browns, 1-2 Falcons, and 3-0 Chargers, you get, and 0-3 Jets. That's the team that I knew was winless. You have an easier schedule. Take advantage of those 5 games. Let's get the rookies going. Let's hope that they start to take that next step. Because remember, I'm not panicking. I said that abundantly clear many times in this video. Because Chop Robinson wasn't good in the first 6 weeks last year, but was phenomenal in the last 9 weeks. So hopefully, same type of thing here where these rookies start to get going. All right, that'll do it for this episode of Dolphins Today. Appreciate everybody for tuning in. If you have not subscribed already and are still watching, what are you waiting for? Join the family here at Dolphins Today.